Hi, everyone. My name is Misha. I'm a death doula and grief tender, and you're listening to Halva for the Heart, Dying and Grieving in Diaspora. On today's episode, we have a very special guest. Their name is Yarrow Magdalena, and I am so honored that they agreed to be on this podcast because I have been following their work for years, and I feel so lucky that they said yes. Yarrow Magdalena is a maker, writer, and grief companion living on the east coast of Scotland. They facilitate creative projects and gentle rituals for seasons of loss, make handmade grief quilts, and host the Grief Glimmers podcast. Their hope is to change the culture around grief and to normalize death so we can explore these experiences as gateways into a softer, more embodied life. Yarrow's website is glimmerportal.com, and they are also a web designer and small business mentor over at pinkwellstudio.com. You are going to hear us talking about Yarrow's work as a death worker, their experience through the death of their mother last year, how they work with ritual and textiles and quilts and threads and yarns to help process their grief and to create something out of their grief. And we'll also talk about activism and how to be an activist in today's world and the grief around the different identities that we hold under these systems of capitalism and patriarchy and so on. It's a very meaty conversation. I know that you'll really love Yarrow as much as I do. And I hope you head over to their podcast, The Grief Glimmers, and listen to the interview that I did on their podcast. It may be coming out later than this one, but go over there, follow their podcast, and you'll get notified when it comes out. And while you're at it, I invite you to follow this podcast as well. You'll get notified when I release upcoming episodes. And if you look in the show notes, I have links to all of Yarrow's websites and a way to contact them, a way to work with them, and also links on how to contact me. I would love to hear about what this episode brought up for you. Send me a message. I can pass it along to Yarrow. You can reach out through email or Instagram or even as a voice note. So all that is linked below. All right, let's get to the interview. Thanks so much for being here and enjoy the episode. I want to welcome everyone to our conversation today. I have on the podcast Yarrow Magdalena, who is a quilter and a death worker and someone I've been following for years and years. I got your book, Rituals, during lockdown, and I think I just saw someone post about it on Instagram and recommended it, so I got it. And I had no idea you were also a death doula and also a quilter. I didn't know anything about you. I just got this book. And then I kept hearing your name pop up in different places, the spaces I was in. And I'm like, wait a minute, that's that person who wrote that book I have. So it's so great to have you here. And I get to we actually get to connect. And now I have a podcast too. I've been listening to your podcast for years. And I'm so grateful that you wanted to be on this podcast and have this conversation. Yeah, welcome.
Welcome. Yeah, thank you so much. Well, yeah, thank you. I'm just really honored. It's so fun to hear how small the world is. I'm so glad we connected. Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah. So we're just going to start off with the question that I feel like I ask everyone. How did you get into death work as a death doula?
Well, it was definitely not what I was imagining I was going to grow up to do as a teenager or in my 20s, but I think looking back now, like I'm a Scorpio, I have many planets in Scorpio. I've always been kind of interested and curious about death. And I lost my uncle when I was quite a small child. And that was obviously not something I really thought about at the time. But again, looking back now, I can see that as a family, we didn't really have a culture around death or grief rituals together. And yeah, as a teenager, definitely had like long stretches of like, yeah, deep, moody teenage vibes, basically. And yeah, I think I was always curious about other people's emotional landscapes. And I trained as a death doula in 2019, at which point, other than losing my uncle and some other less close relatives, I hadn't had my own experience with death yet. But I really felt like the death movement made so much sense to me. I was really kind of fascinated by learning more and seeing it as a kind of framework to explore other big questions that I had always been really interested in, like, why are we here? What is life? What happens when we die? What do I really feel is true for me about the universe and my own soul and all these, like, big things. And yeah, I felt that mortality kind of offers this real anchoring in these questions because yeah, I think it spoke to me because it's not really a religious framework. It doesn't feel like there's a lot of dogma. It kind of feels more like an opening to me. And I had come across other people doing really amazing death work, and I really wanted to become part of that community. That made a lot of sense to me. And yeah, in 2019, I had just moved to Scotland, and that was I mean, I had no idea, obviously, that the pandemic was coming. I had no idea what losses were ahead of me, but I think I had this sense that I was going into a bit of hermit chapter in my life. I didn't know anyone in Scotland when I moved up here. I had other friends in Brighton who wanted to move up as well, but I knew that the initial time here would be pretty solitary, and I moved to a small town on the coast here and was like, right, I think this is the time to train. And yeah, I chose the University of Vermont. They offer a really beautiful program, and it was so rich for me. I really learned so much. It really changed my perspective on so many things in life. And I didn't immediately go into grief or death related work because I felt like I needed to, really ground myself in my own practices first and learn so much more than I could within that program. I think the program really was just like a starting point for me. Um, and then the pandemic did hit, and I, went even deeper into solitude. And I think, like that was a big grief for me in itself. It was in some ways a period that really served me, and I really needed that because it allowed me to have the quiet I'd always wanted. But in other ways, it was also really hard. I had so little in-person contacts here initially. And then the people I did know couldn't really travel out to where I was living. So there were really long stretches of time where I didn't have any in-person human contacts with other people. And then sitting with the materials of the death doula training some more and thinking about them and also connecting with people online and, talking has really, yeah, allowed me to deepen. And then I wrote that book, Rituals, in 2020. And again, like that helped me to kind of gather in my own practice right now and consider what I was doing, what was working for me, what kinds of reflections were feeling meaningful for me at that time. And at the end of that year, I had a big accident that meant that I was really limited in my mobility for some time. I was in hospital for a while. And so, yeah, then I went even deeper into that solitude, even though I probably didn't think that was still possible when I did fall down the stairs. But yeah, so I think all this to say, death work has found me. It hasn't always, meant literal death. It didn't really originate in losing someone close to me, but it was more general curiosity. And now that I have lost people close to me, I'm so glad that I had that foundation and know so much more. And I think the things I learned there really are things that I wish we all knew. Yeah.
Wow, you really went on a journey like through the last few years. That's a
Yeah.
lot. Yeah. I can't imagine. I live in a big city, so I can't, and like with my husband, I can't imagine like going through the pandemic, like really with alone.
Mhm.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So I know in the last year or so your mom died, and I'm just wondering how your death work has changed since then, since you started before you were doing this work before that. But how has it changed since then? I know you've like shifted your
Mhm.
podcast to be centered around grief, but how has it changed in other ways?
Yeah, that's a great question. So my mom died at the end of July 24, so that's like a year and a few months ago now. And I would say that initially, my sister and I really just existed in this bubble of shock because we didn't know why she died. We still don't know that. She wasn't really ill in any way that could have threatened her life. She was just found dead at home. And I think, yeah, that was a deep, that sounds so weird, right? But that was a deep invitation into mystery, I think, because just really surrendering to the not knowing was something that we had to do in the end, right? There was a period of time where we thought maybe there would be an autopsy, or maybe we would somehow learn more, or we would receive the police report and then maybe something would make sense. But I think in the end we had to let that go, and that was very humbling. Yeah, that was really deeply humbling. And I think I turned even more to kind of ritual and my connection to the divine, and needed a lot of time and spaciousness. So I would say initially it didn't affect my grief work because I didn't do any grief work. I was just, surviving and taking care of my family and doing the best I could with all these things that I had to arrange. But now I think it definitely gave me more courage to talk about these things, and that has become more precious to me. I think having been through this big experience that I really didn't see coming, I just wish that I had been part of more conversations about what that might be like, even if it wasn't, in the present for me. I think that that can really happen to all of us. All of us can lose someone we love, like from one moment to the next, and there might not even be an explanation for why that happens. So, yeah, I think where I see the gift in how painful that was is just that I I've really surrendered like any ideas of like I could figure life out, like, like with my human body and brain and capacity. I just really have reached the limits, right? Like, there was nothing we could do about that. And yeah, that's really relaxing also in another way, because I think up until that point, I was still under the illusion that there was stuff to figure out, and like I could have control so somewhat over the course of my life. And of course, I have autonomy and choices, and those are really important, and I'm super grateful for them. But I'm just living, in a much softer place now of like, well, let's see. Let's see what happens. Let's see what we can do. And yeah, like I said, that is really relaxing. And I think that is, yeah, hopefully showing in my work as well. I hold space differently for people. I'm less scared of the big stuff coming up because, yeah, like that just really does happen. And yeah, I hope there's a little bit more depth. I just think that every loss, in a way, whether that's of a person or ability or a place we used to live or an identity we used to hold, just softens us and allows us to be more compassionate. And I think, yeah, it's tough in a way working in grief and death, isn't it? Because you always have this awareness of like, oh gosh, there's so many experiences out there that are just not mine, and I can't speak to them. I don't know what that's like. But yet, I also think people who've done a lot of grief work kind of connect to each other in a different way. Like I feel even when I'm hanging out with my friends, and we know it's just not just me. Like we have all lost so many things since 2020. Yeah, there's just more intimacy, and I really love that. I feel like there's less small talk and more intimacy. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I'm wondering, you talk about like the shock of
Hmm.
losing your mom and how. I know it must be different, but how was that different to like the shock of your accident and like the grief around that? Because that was also unexpected.
Hmm. Oh yeah, interesting. Gosh, I really have been trying to learn more book knowledge about shock, right? Because I'm sure there's fascinating research about it, and I kind of really wanted to understand it better. I think the accident was like a really embodied experience in that I was in so much pain, and there was a story that I was in the center of. Like it was New Year's Eve, there was snow everywhere. I had planned to stay in by myself because we were in lockdown, but I had ordered some takeaway, and I meant to open the door and receive the takeaway at the top of my stairs, and then I just fell and like dramatically broke my bones in lots of different places. So yeah, I didn't, I didn't really receive bad news in one moment because that was kind of an unfolding how I got to the hospital, and then I had all these scans, and then the first surgery and then another one, and like as time passed, I think I understood more and more how that was a lifelong thing, and I was, never gonna walk the way I used to anymore. And when my mom died, that was one phone call, and so. Yeah, that was different. I think there was more longing in that. There was less of a sense of like, okay, I can take these herbs and I can do my physiotherapy stuff. I really didn't have any means to kind of alleviate that situation. That was just a fact, and I had to fly back to Germany immediately and confront that. So, but I think what was maybe similar in both these situations was that I became really feral, and that's something I think that's actually really beautiful that bodies do, and that like I I didn't sleep and eat and socialize in my own rhythm. Like I looked to other people to kind of regulate in that way because I was so outside of normal time and space. Um, and yeah, I kind of think there's something actually really beautiful in that initial phase of grief where shock kind of really gives us just so much permission to not pick up the phone, not answer emails, not do any of those normal things we would be doing, and just, do the most kind of instinctual things. Like now I'm hungry, now I'm tired. And it doesn't really matter if it's like 3 p.m. in the afternoon or it's 3 a.m. in the morning, like you're just in a different world. And so, yeah, I think those were the similarities, I would say.
Yeah, I'm thinking about, I have a friend right now who's like going through like very acute grief. And I'm trying to like, I lost my mom 13 years ago and I'm trying to like relive it to like remember exactly what was helpful and what wasn't. I'm like, oh, should I send her a meme about grief? Would that be helpful? And I'm like, nah, probably not. We're not there yet.
Mhm. Yeah, maybe not, but I think like people have also asked me, like, was there something we could have done in the first few days or weeks that could have been different? So I love that you're wondering that, and I love that to be part of the conversation. I'll say, like, when my mom died, two of my friends came over and stayed with me that night, and I didn't sleep at all, but I loved hearing them breathe, and they made sure that I ate before I got on the plane. And yeah, food is really the main thing initially, like food and sleep and drinking enough water. And then also what I wish that had been more on my radar was like capturing memories, because there was a lot of stuff that happened in the first 10 days that is a complete blur to me now, but it's kind of important to the narrative, because we had conversations with the police. I was at the hospital, and we had to make a lot of choices really quickly. And I just really have no idea how we did that, or like what kind of conversations we had. And I took a few pictures on my phone, just kind of the plane, of like landing in Berlin. And I don't know if that maybe sounds silly, but these really mean a lot to me now, to kind of be able to get back in time a little bit and be like, oh yeah, and then this happened, and then that happened. And um, I so appreciate, sometimes I reach out to friends, and I'm like, do you remember how I told you that she died? Especially friends that knew my mom. And I even go, to be totally honest, again, I know I'm a bit self-conscious about how weird that sounds, but like I have in the last few months gone back into voice notes where I shared the news with friends just because I wanted to, just wanted to hear my own voice from that time and kind of trace back, I guess, like what I was feeling and thinking and just making sense of things. So I think that's stuff that you probably don't think about in the first few weeks, but they're so valuable later. Yeah.
Yeah. Voice notes are
Hmm.
sacred. You hold on to those. Yeah.
Yes.
Some of the
Yeah.
first thing my friend sent me was a voice note. Her dad died, and she sent me a recording of a voicemail message from 2007 that she had
Hmm.
saved. And I was like, wow,
Hmm.
wow, that's so wow. I wish I
Yeah.
had those of my mom. Like I don't have any of those. I
Mm.
used to call her cell phone like just to hear her voice being like, "You've reached the phone of blah blah blah." And that
Mhm.
was yeah, the day that got cut off, I was like, oh, that was a
Yeah.
whole grief. Yeah.
Yeah. We luckily have a little video where my mom sings happy birthday to someone else, but we just cut the other name out now and then we sing it to each other.
That's cute. That's cute. Do you want to share more about your mom? Want to hear about her?
Yeah, she was really fun. She was super alive, and lots of people have commented that it is so weird that she's died because she always felt so alive. She's really fun. She was a Gemini. Her name was Marina, and I think she just still had so many plans. Was 64 when she died, and I think, yeah, one thing I will share is that I'm really grateful for is that we had the most beautiful goodbye. So the last time I saw her was like 3 weeks maybe before she died. And I was in Berlin where my sister lives. So my mom and I were both visiting my sister in Berlin, and we spent the day in a spa. And at the end of the day, which was so beautiful, we dropped my mom off at the train station, and the train was kind of on the tracks already, but it stood there for another 5 minutes. And when you already bought the train, it's kind of awkward. Like you're standing there on the platform, you're like, okay, bye. But my sister and I, and we were such a cheesy family. Like we would often do that kind of stuff, but we would stand on the tracks and just said over and over again, like, I love you so much. It was the best time. I can't wait for next month. This was amazing. I love you so much. We said I love you at least 5 times, standing and waiting for the train to depart. And obviously, we had no idea that she was gonna die. But I'm so glad we had that. And so, could have also been like, what's for dinner or something. But yeah, so that was good.
It's so beautiful. I'm like tearing up that you have.
Oh,
I want to do that more now. Just like tell people
yeah.
over again that I love them. So
Yeah.
sweet. Now,
Mm.
I wanted to ask about the quilt you made with your mom's
Mm.
textiles.
Mm-hmm.
And had you made a memorial quilt before? And what was that process like?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I hadn't made a memorial quilt in quite that way before. I had also taken Melissa Ward's class, Grief Threads, which I loved. And I had some textiles from my friend Frances, who died by suicide a few years prior. And I had kind of like made small things with them and definitely was exploring grief in textiles and thinking about those things, but hadn't made a quilt quite in the same way. That was, just from textiles that belonged to someone I loved. And yeah, it was my sister's birthday in December last year. And I think both our first birthdays were just like really difficult. And we just wanted to make the most of, just being together. And I had the stack of bedding and my mom's favorite dress. And I had tidying up the flat was hard. We didn't have much time at all. We couldn't put a lot of thought into it. Otherwise, I might have grabbed other things, but I had those things and I hadn't planned to make a grief quilt with them. But they matched in color, luckily. There were like blues and purples, and some velvet was in there as well from like a pillowcase, I think. And so a week or 10 days before my sister's birthday, suddenly was like, oh my God, I need to make a quilt. And so I worked on it every day in the week leading up. And it was obviously deeply emotional because I had intentionally not washed these things. So they really still smelled of my mom. And cutting into them was hard. I really tried so much to preserve every tiny little bit of, of those things. And yeah, it ended up being like an improv lab quilt. I don't think it's visually like my best work, but obviously it's my most meaningful work. And I think my sister really loves it. I love seeing it when I come and stay at my sister's house. And I've made others since and just really love that practice so much. I think it's a really beautiful way to yeah, hold on to memories and have something that, really reminds you of the person that you lost. And I think that the process of making them itself also is so healing because this past winter I wasn't working a whole lot and I spent a lot of time just kind of sitting with candlelight. And I think if I hadn't been quilting or stitching in some way, I probably would have just watched reality TV or something, because I just really didn't have more headspace to engage with something intellectually stimulating. And I think that's something I appreciate so much about textile work. Of course, it can be like hugely creatively challenging and like you can go so far with it, but you can also pick up really simple projects where you're just going up and under until something comes together, and that feels so good. Yeah.
Yeah, there's something about hand stitching instead of using a machine that like
Hmm.
I don't know. When I did grief threads, I used a machine because I was like, well, I know how to use a machine, so why would I waste my time hand stitching? And that's just for people who don't know how to use a machine. Uh,
Yeah.
and then she challenged me to hand stitch, and I was like, whoa, I haven't done this in so long. I
Yeah.
forgot that like this is
Hmm.
wow. It's
Hmm.
also a lot more forgiving. You can
Hmm.
like if
Yeah.
there's a hole, you just kind of like tuck it with a needle a few times and
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
True. I have hand quilted that quilt as well. I did some of the piecing with the machine because I really only had a week. But then I quilted everything by hand and it's quite sparse stitching. It's not like super dense because again, time. But yeah, still just that was so, so nice to do.
Mm. Yeah, I'm working on a quilt now that I'm realizing so I started doing it. I was like asking people for clothes they didn't want anymore to like practice making a memorial quilt as if we had someone's clothing. Because I haven't used like some polyester fabrics and like weird jean fabrics. So I wanted to test it out. And my sister and her girlfriend came to visit last year, and her girlfriend was like, "Oh, I don't really want these clothes. Do you want? You can have them." And so I got them, and then they broke up. And so now I realize I'm like making a memorial quilt to my sister's ex.
Wow. Mhm. That's so cool.
Yeah, I haven't told her yet, but I'm maybe I'll give it to her. I don't know if she'll want it or not. I'm not sure.
That's so cool. Yeah. I think I wish we would, make more space for grief rituals for relationships and places and other and jobs and, so many different things. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So I know you quilt and I know you crochet. Are there other types of fiber textile things you do? And are they going to be in your upcoming rituals book?
Oof. Oof. Um, yes, I do other things. I really love embroidery. And I make kind of like usable things. I really love small projects. So at the moment, I'm really into making little, gosh, I'm going to say the German word. It's called Kirschkernkissen, and that means cherry stone pillow. And do you know what a cherry stone pillow is? Do people? Oh, okay. I think that's not a thing outside Germany, possibly. But basically, cherry stones, right? You know what they look like. And you can buy them actually, interestingly, in big bags, like huge bags of cherry stones. And they are an alternative to a hot water bottle because you can heat them and they will retain heat for quite a long time. And they also make a really beautiful sound, as you can imagine. It's like quite earthy and really beautiful.
Can I
And
wait? When you say
yeah.
cherry stones, you mean the pits?
Yes. Hmm.
Okay. Okay. We don't call
Yeah.
them stones. Okay. Pits.
Oh, do
I
you
just
not? Oh,
no.
okay.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. Well, yep. Yeah. So anyway, so yeah, I make these little hand embroidered pillows that you can put it on the radiator or you can have it in a microwave or in your oven. And they're really nice to put on your chest. So I recently made one for a friend with like a big pomegranate and it says ancestral blessing. and then they can warm it up and put it on their chest and hopefully feel ancestral blessings. I also really like making pouches. I don't know why, but pouches just truly do a lot for me because I like things to be tidy, gathering things up, and I think of them as little comfort bags. So that's like a practice I really love sharing with people in grief is to make a comfort bag because I think grief brain is real. Like I forget things all over the place. And so, especially in the first few months of like acute grief, I always carried this little grief bag, even inside my house. I would like go from the bed to the sofa and back and carry this little bag with me. And I would have like a crochet project, an essential oil roller, a lip balm, a stone I like to touch, maybe like a tiny tarot deck, a sweet, like that kind of stuff. And then if I had to really leave the house, I would also religiously take it with me and find that really comforting. What else? I make tiny quilts sometimes as like ritual mats, so like to pull tarot cards on. They're just like this big. I like making wall hangings. Yeah, lots of things.
So are they going to be in the rituals book?
Okay, okay.
Can I make a
Yeah.
request?
Yeah, thank you so much for persisting with that question. So I just want to admit, like, yeah, I've taken the rituals book off the market 2 years ago because I feel a little bit embarrassed about parts of it. And I think I'm sharing that because I hope other people, feel less alone in the cringe of their own creations, basically. I wrote rituals so quickly, I think in like 2 or 3 months in the first wave of lockdowns, and felt this real urgency. And I think I just have more to say now because obviously so much has happened now. And also, I just want to give it a little bit more time, but yeah, anyway, took it off the market and said I was going to rewrite it. And then stuff happened in my life, which means I still have not done that. But yes, I would like to include those projects. And I'm wondering if maybe there's actually a second book that could be called Creative Grief because I wonder if rituals should just be general and full of general rituals. And maybe Creative Grief will be another book. Yeah, I'm not sure.
Yeah, I was thinking about that book and how I didn't know you were deaf, doing all these things. And I was like, I think there's one grief ritual in there. That's it.
Yeah. 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 Mhm.
Um, yeah, it's so interesting. Okay, so I was looking through your website and your little about me as we were preparing, and I just love how you describe yourself and just like name all the identities that you hold and the backgrounds you have. And I don't have it in front of me. Actually, do you want me to read it? I can read it.
Oh God, you can, yes, but you don't have to if you.
Let's say you describe yourself as white, neurodivergent, middle-aged, queer, with education and class privilege and a working class background, as polyamorous and living with some invisible physical disabilities, and you have no children.
Mhm.
I'm curious why you went into such specific detail when you identifying yourself in that way, and like
Yeah.
how do I'm actually also curious about like the order in which you said those things. I feel like when I describe myself, I put like the most important one to me
Mhm.
first, right? And I find those most important ones are like the ones that actually like hold the most grief as well. And so how do
Mhm.
you find that your identities hold grief?
Mhm. Yeah. Well, I think I went into such detail because I think like grief is such a tender space, right? And I know that I turned to podcasts, for example, in really some of my darkest times in life. And I also think that like trust was quite important in the listening. So obviously, if someone decides to work with me or take a class or join something, they will want to know who I am and if we do share any identities or maybe also where we don't. Um, and I also think like, not everyone relies on visuals. So I totally understand that people would want to know that I'm white and that maybe they prefer to work with someone who shares more of their identities, but they might not, some people have visual impairments, they might not necessarily see pictures of me. And also, I think we need to get away from like making so many visual assumptions about people because that is complicated in another way. So I think there's like value in like also naming those things in writing. And I know that for me, I for certain things in my life, I just seek people that really get where I'm coming from. And then it is important to me to know kind of what identities they have. And sometimes you have to really dig that out. And so it's like, well, I could also just say it, right? I don't think that the order of those identities is kind of, how they are important to me because I think I would hope that I am a friend also. That's really important. And I'm like a dog person and I'm my sister's sibling. Like that's one of my top 5 identities, I would say, to be an older sister. But so yeah, I think the order is a little bit random to me. But definitely also, of course, like, these identities also hold grief. I think like being German and Italian has its own flavor of grief around our cultural history and how that plays out in my family or not. Having visible and visible disabilities has been really interesting to me, like becoming really visibly disabled through the accident. There was a long stretch of time where I was walking with like a walking frame every day, and obviously that's extremely visible. And I never imagined like what it would be like to be navigating the public in that way. And also, that doesn't mean that I'm an expert on disability or understand every disabled person's experience, but yeah, it can be helpful to name those things, I think. And the kid stuff, I think, yeah, also like maybe that's more relevant to business related work, but I just noticed that in some business support spaces, people often talk about being a parent and how much that impacts their work life. And so I just thought it'd be nice to also say that I don't know what that's like actually, Yeah.
I'm realizing now as you're talking about it that I don't know if this feels true to you, but to me it feels like the inkling to describe yourself in these ways feels very neurodivergent.
Yeah, maybe. Yes. Yeah, but it's also useful. So I just really feel like the general population could benefit from these neurodivergent approaches to naming identities. Yeah.
Yeah, you're
Mhm.
making me rethink like how I present myself, and it's nice to even get more detail about you as a person. So why not
Mhm.
share those things? Yeah. When you said dog lover, I was like, oh, that should be on there.
Yes. Hmm.
I wanted to ask about your activism because I know that you see yourself, well, I guess I'm assuming you see yourself as like someone who cares about the world and oppression and causes around the world and wanting to be involved and also living in a place that isn't like close to many protests, I assume, and like you said, living with disability. So how do you incorporate your activism into your grief and death work?
Yeah. Ooh. Yes, I think that definitely touches on like areas of grief as well, because I think, yes, I am someone who cares about justice in the world and what's happening. And I often can't contribute in the way that I would like, or that maybe are popular or more visible. So I'm not really posting on Instagram, for example. And well, I have this, anyway, I'm not going to tell you the very long story, but basically, I was posting every day for many years and I left and completely deleted that account at the end of 2020. And I now have this little account where I never post. I just send memes to my sister. That's all I do. And that's like a really important way in which we bond. So I'm not going to delete that. But also, it's not really a business presence or anything like that. And yeah, so I think like, obviously I look to other people that I really respect and admire, and I can appreciate that they take a lot of time to share resources and signal boost important things. And I don't do that. So I think when I was on Instagram, it really just took up too much time. It was affecting my mental health. It took away from other things that I wanted to do. It didn't feel effective. And but also I don't protest in person like on the streets as much as I would like. I do sometimes, but it really takes it out of me and it's just hard. I think it's physically hard, and also I don't have citizenship in the country that I live in, so I need to be kind of extra careful. And things are changing here as well around like what is or isn't legal or what you can get arrested for. So that's another grief. Like I would really love to do more of that. So to answer your actual question, I think I had to become really pragmatic in some ways and just really look at like what can I do. One thing I can do is like I'm very good at paperwork, so all my friends, especially with disabilities, come to me with their annoying paperwork, and I just spend some time sitting with them and being like, yeah, section 3B, gotta go back to that one more time. And that's become a real passion. Like, I love disability related paperwork. Bring it. I'm like, I also really love having unshaming conversations with people because I've had to navigate so much stuff around like meeting my own physical needs. Like I was just saying to a friend the other day that there was a stretch of time where I was like running online workshops and teaching, but I was also getting Meals on Wheels, because I couldn't stand in the kitchen and even just heat something up. And there was shame in that for sure. And so, yeah, I just really love helping people unshame navigating those things. Um, what else do I do? I like to think about economic justice in how I do work or like how I offer things. And obviously, that is really complicated. I like to just name that I have a working class background. That's kind of how I grew up. I do now own the little flat that I live in. My economic reality is really different to how it was when I grew up. So yeah, but I'm aware of different ways of being around money, I guess. And I always try to both have my own boundaries and not exclude people for lack of fun. So I really try to think about how can I structure my work in a way that feels generous and that offers a lot for free. So both my podcast, for example, they are ad free and they're also, free to listen to. There's over 300 episodes now. And I don't really hold back any information. It's not like I'm like, oh, I know these 3 tips of how to build a website, but you have to buy my course to hear about them, right? I answer pretty much any question on the podcast. And when people, can't afford to pay for courses, I also offer them for free. But I also have boundaries, and I think that's important too. Like I used to do so much pro bono work and really depleted myself in the first 2 years of my business. And I now am just thinking a little bit more about reciprocity and what I actually have capacity for. And yeah, that feels good.
I'll say your podcast is like one of the first places where I heard this sort of language and like got me thinking about. At first, I was like, I don't own a business, not important to me. A year later, I'm like, oh, I should go back and listen to that episode that Yarrow did. Do you want to name your podcast? I don't think you've said what they are.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. Yeah. So one is called the Kind Business Podcast, and the other one is called Grieve Glimmers.
Mhm. Yes, and Grief Glimmers was called something else when I first started listening to it. So I
Oh my
haven't.
God, it was called so many different things actually. So we couldn't possibly name all the
Okay.
different names that it has, but it's now Grief Glimmers. I'm very committed to that name.
Okay.
So yeah.
I love it. I love it. Okay, so we're starting to wrap up. I'm just wondering if you wanted to share any sort of like ritual or practice you've been doing lately that's been helping,
Mhm.
yeah, support you.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, I think like, oh, maybe I shared that with you and when I interviewed you actually. So I'm sorry if I'm a broken record, but I think like the first thing I always share with people is to make physical space for grief in their homes if they can. And I know like that's different for all of us. It could be the tiniest little corner on the windowsill, but just to have a space with maybe like a stone and a tea light, maybe a picture, maybe your tarot deck if that's part of your practice, or a plant or a flower or whatever. But to give it physical room in your space where you can see it, I think that's really meaningful and it really helps us shift our attention. And I also feel like sometimes I have an altar in the corner of my room and I don't even have that much time to go sit with it or to do deeper rituals, but just its presence makes me feel like I'm still in touch with my grief and I can let that just be and coexist with me. So there's something about externalizing that and having fluidity in how I engage with it that feels really helpful. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. I do try to like find a balance between like having photos of my mom everywhere and it feeling a bit too much. Um, is there anything else you want to share about rituals or anything you do?
Yeah, I think I'm really falling back in love with the tarot at the moment. I think it's so nice to have these conversations with yourself and maybe your past loved ones in that way. You and I were talking about how it can feel kind of awkward and like unfamiliar to speak to loved ones that we lost, and how that feels like a little bit, yeah, strange initially. And my mom also loved the tarot. And so I really love inviting that presence in kind of through cards. And yeah, it's just a really sweet, simple, beautiful tool. I'm like a really visual person. I'm just looking at my card for the day over there. And I, yeah, I love a card as a spark for connection. Yeah.
Thank you. I haven't dove into tarot yet, but yeah, I'm very curious. Okay. Thank you so much.
You are so welcome. It's so great.
Yeah, how can people find you? How can they work with you? You mentioned the podcasts already, but I know that you're offering so many different things.
Yeah, so at glimmerportal.com, I offer weekly drop-in sessions on a Monday night, UK time, where we can just kind of get together and everyone does their own thing pretty much, but there's this sweet opening together and closing and group accountability. I offer tarot readings again. I have some classes. I'm recording a new one now that I'm really excited about. It's going to be called Cave Magic, and I'm going to talk more about like really nesting and like making your home magical and making space for grief inside your home. On the winter solstice, on the 21st of December, I'm going to offer a grief tending virtual retreat that I'm excited for. And then over at pinkwellstudio.com, I offer web design and tech support for entrepreneurs, as well as mentoring and classes. Yeah.
I don't know how you balance both, but you do a great job.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you. Yeah, I really love talking to you. Thank you.
And if you haven't listened to my interview on Yarrow's podcast, go over there to the Grief Glimmers
Yes.
podcast.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much.